Now it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today, Todd Snelgrove. He's a global subject matter expert in value buying and selling. Currently, he is the founding partner at Experts in Value, a consultancy firm that helps companies drive value strategy by making sure that value is created, calculated, communicated, and priced for. So with that, Todd, welcome.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you to the Leverage Point team for, as always, putting together these great opportunities to share best practices and information. And what we'd like to talk today about is selling services, which is different than selling products. But in both cases, if you're not the lowest price, you need to demonstrate what that value is. So as Nick said, I spent 20-something years in industry, business to business. The last bunch of it as the global vice president of value for a big engineering company. But the idea was, if you create value, how do you communicate it so your customers are willing to pay for it? We spent a lot of money on engineering great stuff, but we found that the marketplace, the rise of professional procurement, the economic buyer was happening, and the value propositions didn't resonate as well if we didn't quantify it. But I also noticed things over my journey of things we do in the services business that might actually not lead to the desired behavior we hope for. Maybe actually unintentionally causes our customers to do things we don't want to do. So today I'd like to share some best practices around that. I always believe there's 4 stages to value. It starts with creating something that is of value to your customer. It's great that the engineers sit in a room somewhere and come up with stuff, but if the customer doesn't perceive it as value or they're not willing to pay for that value, then there's no point of doing it. Once that's done, and during the development phase, of course, value needs to be quantified, calculated. Hard numbers put to it that the customer can resonate with and say, that number makes sense to me, and that range is impactful, and wow, why are we talking about a price difference of X when the profit impact you can bring is Y? And then during our presentations and our communications and our marketing, are we engaging early with our customers, higher up with our customers, and are we sending that value message so when a bid specification time comes, it's not the lowest price that meets the minimum specification discussion? And then finally, I used to say capture value, because you need to get paid when you create this and deliver it, but a professor I do a lot of work with, Jim Anderson, said, no, that capture reinforces this zero-sum mindset. The value is just going to be split or taken away from the customer when you capture it. There's a lot of research, which I'll share some today, that shows that both the supplier and the buyer can both make more money when the focus is on measurable value, not slicing the pie in a different way. So a lot of the examples will come from this book that I was involved with, Value First, Then Price. So starting with what is your value, measuring it, and the importance of quantifying it. And what I think is interesting is I got about 4 or 5 procurement experts to dive into this. How do I want to be sold to? What will I buy? Am I willing to pay a higher price if value is demonstrated? So we'll hear some examples from them, but there's some real great stories and examples in the book around that. Real quickly, my background, I should put up my old company, but big industrial. I worked for a company called SKF, but you can see I've had experience with industrial, medical, financial, pharmaceutical, high tech. So the message and the examples I might revert to are more industrial, but the concept works across all industries. So I focus on helping companies quantify value, and that's why I have a partnership with Leverage Point, because they have the tool to do it. 20-something years ago, there wasn't a tool, so we had to create our own. It doesn't work when you create your own. I mean, making sure those numbers make sense, making sure the software is visible and understandable by customers. So, that's the starting point. Helping companies with the positioning of their products in the marketplace. A lot of product companies that want to create service businesses, how do you do that? How do you take a product mindset company and help structure it, create it, motivate it to go start selling services that maybe you gave away as free before or justified as a throw-in? Selling training. How do you get comfortable with what those numbers mean? How do you have a business discussion with procurement where you feel confident explaining the value? Reviewing a lot of presentations of marketing materials. I see a lot of companies, the first 20 pages of their corporate presentation to customers is about them, where their head office is, how long they've been in business, how many patents they have, what's ISO, whatever that is. But really starting, and I suggest, page 1 or 2 of your presentation should be, here's the value impact, the profit impact I think I can deliver to you. And that comes from procurement people saying, if people would put that information up front, now you have my attention. We'll discuss how you can do it, how you measure it, and these things, but really making sure we're leading with the communication of value, which leads to pricing of value. If you can quantify what your value is for a customer, then charging for it is much easier. That leads to different business models, performance-based, outcome-based versus time and material type things, which we'll talk about today. Training across the whole company, and then helping build these contracts. We talk a lot about performance-based contracting, and people get risk-averse, scared. It's too big to take all that risk. I can't control it. I'll give you some examples of how to do it where it's more of a collar, more of a little bit of skin in the game, which procurement seems to like a lot more. How do you do it? How do you measure it? What are the processes around that? And then, just because I've had a lot of background in services businesses, the softwares that some companies buy to implement to drive that value creation. So either as a consultant or if companies are interested in a full-time position, I'd love to talk about that. So getting into the presentation, we'll start with this one slide, fishbone chart, I call it. It comes from the book. As Nick mentioned, you'll get a chapter of the book emailed to you afterwards. So this is myself sitting down with a professor who spent 30 years, Jim Anderson, in the value space. But the question was, as we were together, CEOs might say we want to get paid for value. We need to do it. We're not the lowest price, but how come it's not working as well as it should? And we just started chatting, and Jim put down, Professor, sorry, but I mean, there's the ability to sell value, and then there's the want to sell value. And everybody in the phone's at different stages of their value journey, but it starts with value conceptualization. When you build your new products or service offering, understanding what value does that create for my customer? Again, sitting in an office, but then going to customers, talking to them and saying, with the leverage point tool, if I do this, what would that be worth? If it's going to cost you more to deliver it than it creates a value for the customer, maybe that's something you shouldn't do. Maybe if it costs you $100 to add a functionality or to add a different level of service for a customer, but it creates whatever, a huge number, that's something to do. Is it part of your value selling process? I find a lot of companies will wait to do value quantification at the end. It needs to start early and high. Whoever frames the business case, whoever starts with the numbers, whoever gets the customers to work with them to build that, has a much higher success rate. So value quantification needs to be throughout the whole selling process, not at stage 3, as an example. The tool. Do you have a tool that's easy to use, that the customer believes? And one thing that I've learned over the years, that looks good. I'm amazed at how important the visualization of the value message is. I've seen companies do Excel spreadsheets and screenshot them and put them into PowerPoint. The numbers might be the same, but it doesn't look right. I want to see the break even, the cash flow, the ROI, all those things. It's that 3-page or 5-page report that the CEO is going to see. They're not going to look at the 50-page PowerPoint, the screenshots of somebody's Excel calculation. And by the way, they've seen Excel calculations for years that they don't believe. So the visualization. If you launch with some training, more than a 1-hour to national sales meeting, it needs to be a little more deeper than that. The ongoing aspect, are you constantly driving it? Are your regional managers, are your key account people constantly talking about it? I was just having a conversation with somebody. If your sales compensation rewards volume, not value or profit, I mean, if I have a salesperson have a way to cut a price easily and don't have a way to guarantee value, I'm going to cut the price. My old CEO said that. How many ways do we have to cut a price? Competitor, new market, whatever it is. If I can cut a price by, as an example, 10%, why can't I say, I guarantee my value, but 10% of that I'll put at risk. If I don't deliver value, make your machines last longer, whatever that is, I'll write you a check. So that's getting into the value buying options. The business culture. I mean, a lot of the research shows, and I'll share with you, companies that take this strategy are more profitable. We all need to chase quarterly numbers, to keep the business open. But if the culture is take every order and we'll worry about profitability later, I mean, we can go to a bunch of examples where that doesn't work. And, saying we're going to walk away from bad business. We're going to articulate our value. And if the customer says, I don't value it, we're not going to deliver it and we're not going to take the order. Quick side note here, a professional procurement person once told me, the funny thing with service salespeople is the more I told them I don't value what you do for me, the more they brought more people to create more value. So it's actually a negotiating tactic, but I thought it was very funny and very true from the technical engineer people that I've worked with over the years. And then finally, customer culture. Are you engaging your customers much earlier in the buying process, saying, let's talk value, let's measure value, let's contract on value, so that they can start thinking and buying differently. So hopefully you enjoyed that chapter as a good read and thinking of some of the different opportunities. Now, everybody that's on the phone that's been in sales over the years is probably running into two of the following scenarios. You've gone to a customer and you've explained, hey, we've got this new service, or we can upgrade the service we're bringing you. Instead of doing this, we can do this, this, and this. And the customer says, that's great, but I don't have the money. I don't have the ability to pay. There's no money in the pockets, Todd. Well, having this conversation with my old CEO, and again, just as an example, he goes, Todd, that should never be the end of the conversation. That's not true. Money is always available. It's just, where do I allocate it with who? So if you bring me a business case that I believe, I love to use the example of less energy. It's hard, it's measurable. I mean, I'll go borrow the money. I have no problem doing that. So ability to pay, or maybe we enter into a performance-based agreement as the profit is created by doing whatever you do, that you realize part of it then. So that's when maybe we need to be more creative with the customer, or what they're saying is, I don't believe that your value is tangible, real, and going to hit my bottom line, so I'm going to focus with other areas. So again, the importance of a quantified business case. The other one is called willingness to pay. I have the money, but I've decided that buying somebody else's offering is more important. And for those of you that sell to technical people, head of reliability, head of engineering, they're not used to justifying to their management team why they need to invest in something. Whereas salespeople, marketing people, it's part of what we do. Boss, I want to spend this much money. Here's the expected payback. So willingness to pay says, I've prioritized something higher. This is actually a true story. It's been hijacked by other people over the years, but I did some work with a medical company, Capital Equipment, MRIs, CAT scan type machines in Asia. And I was talking to the managing director afterwards, and as I had left, they had mentioned that they were going after a big contract at the, National Health Hospital in wherever, Sydney, I think it was, and they lost the deal. And I said, oh, that's too bad. He goes, well, there was two real key takeaways. And I said, oh, so you lost to insert competitor? He goes, no, we lost to a parking lot. And I thought, what do you mean? He goes, no, they took the capital that was initially allocated towards adding another machine in another room, and somebody built a business case that said a parking lot was less risky, had higher revenue, and it was incremental. So he goes, there's two things we learned. We thought the technical buyers loved us. They wanted us. They had our other machines. They loved us. So we didn't think we needed to do the work to build the business case. What we didn't realize is our technical buyer had to go to a much higher level. And that person didn't care about responsiveness and relationship. It was dollars and cents. And whoever wanted to sell the parking lot or buy the parking lot did a better job. So with both these scenarios, from a sales perspective, you got to build the business case. You got to build it early. Why sell services? For people that are on the phone that have a product-based business or history within their company, how do you get the reasoning why a service business should be created, why it should be a P&L, why it needs resources? So some of the things that I'm seeing, believe it or not, the buying cycle is much less cyclical. And I'm not saying selling services easy, but in recession times, the first things companies do is stop their CapEx spending. They're not going to spend $1 million on a packaging machine or a new dump truck or whatever it is. They're going to keep their assets and run them longer, which means more service. So all the research shows is that the service business is less cyclical over a long-term period. So for big companies, it's nice to have a smoothed revenue stream versus those ups and downs. Again, anybody that sells services might laugh a bit, but believe it or not, customers are less price sensitive to service pricing than they are to the product pricing. Again, one is $1 million buy. I could say 5% of $1 million, it's a big number. The service dollar amount's usually less. Also, services are tougher to compare, A versus B. So they are willing to give a little more, okay, I like these people, they've done a good job. If I can get the same widget that has the same processor or whatever those characteristics are, I can focus on price. So they're less price sensitive to buying services. I've seen an evolution over the last 20 to 30 years where customers are more open to it today. They don't have the internal expertise they used to have. They know it. They can't keep on staff every lawyer, accountant, engineer. And now they're saying, when it comes to my assets, do I need to have the expertise to manage every one of these? No, I need to know who I can call when they can come and do the right job. So they're more open to outsourcing. We'll talk about this more in a slide or two, but 90% of the cost of an asset happens during its utilization phase. That's where the service comes in. That's where the real money comes in. CapEx is when they buy it. The realization is when they use it. So to get the value out of what they bought, they better run it properly. Again, services is how you run something. Customers more and more becoming focused on outcomes. They're saying, you want to know what? I just want the building to stay cool or the machine to run at this speed. You do what you want to do it because I'm sick and tired of contracting these detailed things and not getting what I want. I'm willing to give that responsibility to my service providers, which is maybe the product people with the service or just straight service providers. The technology, I should change it, the industrial Internet of Things, but the Internet of Things and predictive maintenance, we'll talk about different maintenance strategies, is much more realistic today. The costs have come down on the sensors, the analytics have improved. It's feasible. It's not science fiction like it was 20 years ago. So now you can do remote services much easier, which cuts your costs and help your customer be more profitable. Again, the service person is the one that has that ongoing relationship with the customer. If I'm selling capital equipment, whatever that is, that has a 20-year life cycle, there's a good chance I'm not going to see you for a long time. Your service team is on site every quarter, whatever it is. They're the experts. I'm not saying I want to make them salespeople, but I don't want them to hurt the sales process. They can show upgrades in technology, new improvements, these types of things. So it's a marketing channel also. The point of why sell services and why buy services is they make customers more profitable. So looking at from an asset perspective, so we're going to look at the 4 different stages or strategies of maintenance on an asset, whatever that is. So on the far left, the equipment's installed. You've bought a paper machine, a boiler, a car. It gets installed. Its theoretical life that day is perfect, whatever the engineers have designed it to be. And over time, as we move to the right, it starts to degrade. Slowly, but it starts to degrade. And the cost to repair goes up dramatically over the life of it. And if you wait for the machine to break, not only do you have downtime costs, lost production, lost revenue, lost or increased scrap, but the studies I have seen showed the cost to fix a machine when you don't shut it down properly is 3 to 4 times the price of when you shut it down. So stopping the machine before it blows up, you don't have to fix everything associated with it. So then we look at the different services offerings that kind of fit along the asset life cycle, and it starts with the firefighting strategy, the break fix. And of course, everybody needs to offer this, and of course, customers want access to it. Once the problem happens, there's a 1-800 number I call, and you troubleshoot a team to get here and fix it. As a cost plus usually built, because you don't know how badly the machine's damaged. You might have a cost plus pricing mechanism where whatever it is, it's cost plus X, but hopefully you have the parts in place, hopefully you have a system in place where you can get somebody there, but these are the most costly fixes for you to deliver. They add a lot of value because the machine's down, but they're very costly for the customer to pay for. The next level, is more the preventive, where somebody's done some basic analytics and saying, normally every 6 months, every 5,000 miles, we should do an oil change. We should lubricate the machine once a month. We should align it every year. Whatever that is, they've done some ideas, and it's based on assumptions. The way you drive your car at 5,000 miles is different than the way I drive it. Where we drive it, the conditions we drive it. So it's a step in the right direction. It's great business from a service perspective because you can schedule it. Its value is more than the break fix, but it's just the starting of the next level. The next level gets into the predictive, the internet type stuff, where you have sensors that are sending back information or data that you turn into information. Temperature, vibration, speed, pressure, whatever is important to you. And you say, wait a minute, I'm starting to see this machine do something it doesn't like or I don't like. I better get in there and fix it before it breaks. Again, 70% cheaper, no overtime, no air shipping parts, no downtime for the customer, and I have to fix a lot less than the machine. Maybe I need to fix a sprocket instead of a shaft and the bearings and everything else to go with it. So, today there's a lot of sensors in the marketplace. There's clouds that can help you do this, but having a remote diagnostic center where the data comes back and somebody's looking at it or putting it through algorithms, or you go out and take the data and then analyze it, or even if the customer takes the data and you analyze it. These are just different ways to get it, but the value here is much higher. I think the pricing strategy needs to be different associated this way. And then the future, we could call it this predictive analytics, prescriptive, which is even earlier analytics. I'm so early in the failure mode that I see if I see a signal, if I go fix that now by adding lubricant or aligning the machine, whatever it is, it doesn't even go into failure mode. So you can see that white line tapers off at a much slower rate. Usually preventive and even predictive, it's already gone into failure mode. This gets the failure before it even starts. Now you're paying for the elimination of the failures, the extension of the machine life, not by job. So we'll talk, again, I think service providers should offer all three, and I think it's realistic. The break, fix, preventive, and the predictive are all available today and should be offered to customers. Outcome-based and performance-based contracts. Performance is kind of a KPI. Hit this KPI, hit this KPI, hit this KPI. The outcome is, I don't care what KPI you get, I want the outcome. Ton of paper produced. So they're similar, but they're different. But people that are buying power, a bunch of years ago, it'd be, okay, maybe this is when the environmental focus came in and said, okay, I want traditional power, coal, whatever it is, or I want renewable. I used to care if it was solar or wind or tidal or geothermal. As a buyer today, so whoever your energy company is, wherever you live in the world, they're probably saying to the suppliers of the grid, I'm going to pay for renewable energy. I don't care which one it is. I will pay you based on something called levelized cost of energy by kilowatt or gigawatt produced. So I don't want to own solar panels. I don't want to maintain solar panels. You do that, and I'll pay you for whatever it creates for me. The power by the hour, the Rolls-Royce and then GE following it. I think it's important to know, people talk that it was more, I own an airplane. I'm not an expert in the engines. They're very costly. Okay, fine. I make money when my plane's flying. When the plane's not working because the engine's not working, that's bad. And there used to be penalties and all this. And this is finally where, companies came in and said, pay us for the every hour used or every mile flown. To be clear, it's based on flight availability or engine availability. So with the new Boeing Max 337 or whatever it is, those payments are still going to the GEs of the world or the Pratt & Whitneys or whatever engines are on there, because it's not their job to make sure the plane flies. It's their job to make sure that the asset is available to use. So that maybe reduces some of the risk, because what happens if the company goes on strike? Why should I not get revenue? What happens if you decide to cut out a route somewhere? So these people are paid to have the machines available. Again, people movement. In the old days, one of the big elevator companies might sell, a capital equipment build-in, which was a bunch of costs that had to go to the building owner. And now they're saying, hey, we'll buy the elevator rights. You're going to pay me $10,000 a month for the next 50 years, 30 years, whatever it is. I will make sure that these elevators are available for usage. I will fix them. I will maintain them. I will do the internet connection. Don't worry about it. So we'll help people move the most efficiently through your building, and that's not your problem anymore. So building owners like that. This is interesting for people in different markets, but how your health system gets paid. So I know we have some Americans on the phone, maybe some Canadians or Europeans, but when the hospital is doing a surgery, they get revenue, whether the revenue comes from an insurance provider or the government. So if I'm a hospital and I'm looking at spending millions of dollars on buying a bunch of robotics, it's like, I don't have the budget. What happens if it doesn't work? They're risky. So now they're saying, you want to know what? Every time we use the robot, we'll pay. You own the robot, you maintain the robot, you do the condition monitoring on the robot, the consumables that come with the robot. So the robotics companies are giving two options: buy the machine outright at whatever, or option two, for every hour of use, as an example, or by every procedure, you pay us X. They make more money this way, but it reduces the risk of the hospital, and the hospital is not going to get into maintaining surgical robots. It's not an area of competency they could get. I'll use Caterpillar just because I know some people that were there, but I mean, for their very, very large trucks now, they're saying, don't buy the truck. Pay us for a ton of dirt or ore or iron moved. That's what drives your business. That's how we should get paid. They might do it remotely managing it. They do the condition monitor remotely, but, you know, let's align your payment to me with how you make money. And document processing, you know, saving the images, putting them in folders somewhere or files so I can get to them. You know, pay me per gigabyte or per page or a combination of the two. Don't pay me for the machine sitting there. So this just came out this last year, I guess, 18. You know, they get Gartner Group, they say that, you know, 60% of asset manufacturers, the examples I use above, will start off for outcome-based service contracts. That's in a 4-year swing going from 15 to 60%. It's happening. Your customers want it. Now, how you price it is important. Do you want people to buy it, or are you pricing it as an anchor to something else, which we'll talk about in a minute? So the journey, I kind of look at it 3 stages, and everybody on the phone's in a different spot of that journey. But the foundational things, you know, what is your services strategy? I mean, we'll talk about this later, but is it giving away services to sell products? Or is it going to be a standalone differentiator? Start bundling your offering into buckets that make sense. You know, one company that I saw had over 100 or 200 offerings. I couldn't figure out what the difference between offering A, B, C was. Streamline and package those offerings so they kind of make sense. This is where you should invest the time and money to get your processes and back end structured. How are you going to generate a work order? How are you going to do your billing? Who goes where? This is where some of the field service software can come in to really help. But that's the time to get the back end fixed. You know, what experts do we need? Does everybody need the same ticket, the same skills, the same piece of equipment? Or do I need a range of people? You know, I need so many level technicians, this or this or this, and we'll build teams, and the teams will be regional or by type of equipment or by customer basis. So that's kind of the basics to get it going. Then it becomes a focus where management has said, okay, we've got something now. Let's really start focusing. Let's start working on our pricing options that we deliver for customers. What is the value of those offerings? You know, how do I want to set my sales force up? Do I want to have a reward program where the original equipment salespeople are rewarded for selling the service contract with it? To do so, you need to change the compensation model, because if I'm rewarded on volume of sales, the $10 million piece of machine is much more exciting than the $50,000 a year contract for 20 years that might be at a 3 times higher margin. So start looking at maybe lifetime customer value. So, hey, wait a minute, that service contract is actually worth more. We've got to change the metrics of maybe of what we measure. You know, it becomes a P&L, so it gets the focus. And now you get the same skills, the same piece of equipment, or do I need a range of people? You know, I need so many level technicians, this or this or this, and we'll build teams, and the teams will be regional or by type of equipment or by customer basis. So that's kind of the basics to get it going. Then it becomes a focus where management has said, okay, we've got something now. Let's really start focusing. Let's start working on our pricing options that we deliver for customers. Expanding the offering outside of maybe your own product offering or that own segment. You know, really driving cost out. And now is the time to start with the performance-based and the outcome-based. What I find is sometimes people get excited in the foundation phase of all these new business models, but they don't have their background structured. You can't get to that level until you have the basics ready to run. So I start off every discussion with customers making sure they understand the difference between price, cost, and value. Price is what you pay for something, $100. Cost is the price plus the shipping cost, the receiving cost, the operating cost, the energy cost, the lubrication cost, the return cost, the disposal cost. And value is on the upside. Is it easier to use? Does it take less people to run the machine? Does it run the machine faster, which produces more whatever they produce? So make sure that you're comfortable understanding these 3 words are different. Procurement people have told me how many times they've sent out RFPs to customers. How will you reduce my cost? And salespeople come back with price reductions. Not to be arrogant, but if a customer says, I want a price reduction, I go back, do you need a price reduction or a cost reduction? And this is how we measure cost. It's all these things included. So, and then you have to have a way to measure those costs. Again, a tool and maybe a way to contract it. The PRICEBERG, one of my favorite slides. Customers will focus on the price of your service offering or your product or whatever because it's visible. It's a number. It's sitting right there. But everybody that's with us today, what you do affects a far greater cost and benefit of your customers. Now, this will be different for everybody on the line, but start writing down what are the other things that you can affect for that customer and start putting ranges of impact or formulas. Energies times X times Y. I mean, again, using tools that exist to help you do this, but as you can see, the biggest costs are the cost of ownership, the hidden cost. Price is only part of the picture. Total cost of ownership, we'll talk about that in a minute, but total profit added is a better metric that encompasses everything. It's whoever's got the smallest PRICEBERG wins, not the same as the lowest price. And it's our job is to focus directly at those big costs. What customers tell us is that suppliers don't do a good job of enumerating these or giving me an idea of what they're worth. I'm not guaranteeing it. I'm just giving it on average. This is the range of impact. Just something so I can start to see magnitude. Remember, all you sell is one type of thing or one industry. That procurement person that's buying might be buying 50 different types of things. They might be buying office supply, air travel, company computers, company cars, and then mechanical services. They're not going to be an expert in what you do. So total profit added is my methodology as an evolution of total cost of ownership. Cost only looked at the cost side. What I want to say is you need to look at profit, how I affect your profit. Profit is driven by cost reductions, but there's a lot of things that service companies do that drive profit that needs to be quantified and measured. So somebody builds a machine. So some of the people on here, you work for companies that build big machines, whatever they are. So your design team is making some trade-offs. How long should this machine last? They could make that machine out of diamonds or gold or whatever it is. It would last forever. But they're saying, we'll build in how the machine should last, how it should operate, all these types of things. And they design in the lifetime cost and benefit of that machine. Now a customer acquires that machine. And the reason why I think it's important here, quick story, I did some work with the chief procurement officer of the company that I used to be with, a $6 billion buy. And he goes, we buy in total cost, Todd. Why should I be listening to you? Just because our boss said so. And I said, hey, what do we measure when we're making a buying decision? Here's what I measure when we're making a selling decision, when I'm trying to get my customers. I want to see if we're aligned. And he goes, we already do this. When we're making a buying decision, we find the asset we need or the service that meets the requirements set, and things such as the payment terms, the conditions, the minimum order quantity, the response time, these types of things, and the price of the offering. And I think that's interesting, but that's total cost of acquisition, which is not total cost of ownership. So just because your customer might say we have a TCO methodology, again, not to be arrogant, that's great. I'd love to see what you measure to make your buying decision. I'll show you how we measure the value we deliver. And maybe we can learn from each other. Maybe there's opportunities that drive a lot more value than the total cost of acquisition. And I'll show you some statistics in a minute. That's usually not where the big money is. The slide doesn't have room, but now the customer or you install the asset, you operate the asset, you maintain the asset. This is where the value gets produced. This is where the machine produces whatever it's supposed to. Now, this will be different for everybody on the phone, but how much energy, how much water, how much lubricant, how much ink does that machine use? How long will it last, the product life? Auxiliary repair cost. If I was a user buying a machine, I would want to know, can I get parts for this thing? Or am I, there are some OEMs that will sell machinery at a low price just to pick up the service parts business afterwards. Does it affect my production, yield, quality, these types of things? Is it easy to install? Who's going to install it? And then finally, you get into the disposal phase where the asset's end of life, and most people don't look at this as a cost or a benefit. They throw it away. But a lot of industries now are saying, you want to know what? That could be the biggest driver. So if you're buying a capital asset like a car, it's not the acquisition price that matters. It's the operating cost, the fuel, but also the depreciation. What's that going to be worth in 5 years? Maybe some companies take back their assets, refurbish them. A refurbished gearbox at whatever price. The circular economy. Mr. Customer, don't worry about buying motors. We'll make sure you have all the motors you need for your facility. Some of them are new, some of them are refurbished, but we'll make sure you have what you need. So, there's different areas to look at. So take this slide and sit in a room one day with your people and to say through these different stages, and don't get so caught up, which is in which stage. But what do we do that drives our customers' profitability? And again, for this conversation, take design out. Your customer is buying your service or the product and you're installing it. What are the operating costs and how are you affecting them? Predictive, less parts, faster machine response, whatever it is. Now, a great piece of research from Accenture, and you see there's 4 different segments here. Commercial aircraft on the left, Class 8 trucks or big 18-wheelers, Scan, International Truck, Mack, industrial equipment, fans, gearboxes, pumps, motors, then light-duty pickup trucks for work, because they're including labor in this. And they look, the little blue bar at the bottom is the initial purchase price of the asset compared to its operating cost, its total cost over its life. And you can see between 8 and 12%. The big number is that pinkish purple color at the top. So one example I give for customers is, why are we spending all of our time looking at that 12%? And my old chief procurement officer who wrote a chapter for that book has become a very good friend and confidant, said, well, I can measure it. And I said, wait, maybe we should buy one that's 10% more expensive. Are you crazy? That's a big number. Oh, wait. I said, it's better to get something that runs 2% less expensive and pay 10% more of it. And he laughed. He goes, Todd, that's impossible. 10% is bigger than 2. You need the denominator. So 10% of the 12 is 1.2%. You could buy a boiler that's 10% more expensive, and it represents only a 1.2% increase overall. But on the 88%, if you could get that down by 2%, 2% of 88 is 1.76, about 45% more impactful, more efficiency, longer life of the asset, refurbishing it, easier to manage, install, maintain. I don't know the how. That's what you have to think through. But, I mean, the impact is on the operating side. Too many customers spend their time on the buying side. And again, if you look at, just as an example, they're buying a crane for $1 million, and the service contract is $100,000. That $100,000 affects 88% of the total cost and 100% of the value. Value occurs in use. So again, having these statistics, doing some research, showing the customer, we got to look at the right number here. Maybe we're focusing on the wrong one. I love this lady. She's since changed jobs, but you can read, but suppliers, that's us. Don't come with a business case. It's what we want. Sell your value to get our attention. My favorite part, if you can't quantify your value, don't be surprised at the failure of procurement to do so. That's all you do is sell printers. You better know that. At least try to come in with reasonable estimations to start a discussion. There's no way the procurement people could know every attribute or number within their business. The buying cycle. This chief procurement officer I know, Rob McGuire, gentleman, Scottish gentleman, done a lot of work with him over the years. And one day he drew this out and he goes, the problem with you salespeople is you don't understand how I buy. So let's just take a personal buying example here. Everyone's going to buy a car at some point in their life. Again, I'm just doing this because then hopefully everybody can follow. So a need gets identified. My kids are getting older. They need a car. My car broke. Whatever. I need a car. And then I sit at home and I establish a specification. I don't want a limousine. I don't want a truck. I don't want an electric car. I'm not saying these are rational decisions, but I'm narrowing down the possible scope of who I would even talk to based on my preconceived assumptions. And then I'll say, okay, who possibly can make that type of a vehicle? So there's like 20 car companies in the world. Some of you probably haven't heard of, but maybe you narrow it down to the big 3 in Detroit and 2 of the European ones, whatever. There's 5 of them. But I don't like that one, so there's only 4 I want to talk to. And then you say, okay, I'm going to ask for their proposal, request for information, request for proposal, request for quote. So you go see them, you send them the information and say, what's your price, delivery, etc. Then you're going to, get the information. Then you're going to negotiate. I've got 2 people that I'm interested in here. I'm going to negotiate price, terms, conditions. You make a selection of one of them, probably. And then hopefully you measure, did they deliver what was supposed to be delivered? I think the point of this is, from a sales cycle, what he's saying is your ability to get me to think differently, i.e. that Accenture chart, that, I'm looking at the wrong number, dramatically decreases over the buying cycle. Once I decided I don't want an electric car, Now you come in and say, hey, look at the electric car I have to offer you. It's going to take you a lot of work to get me to even consider that. Now you're challenging my belief, my personal information, my thought process. So if you want your customers to think differently, you've got to get to them before they even enter the buying process. This is where the white papers, the keynotes, the webinar, whatever you do to get that information out there. Too often, salespeople get in the RFQ, RFI stage, and they try to go in and change the specifications then. It's too late, in general. So spend some of your time going to where your customers learn, where they think, so that they'll start to engage differently the next time they get to the buying cycle. Quickly, Gartner just came out with this last year. 27% of the buyer's journey is researched online. Going to websites, going to reviews, going to chat rooms, whatever it is. 22% is internal, meeting people, hopefully the users of whatever you sell, the people that are going to use the computers. More research offline, probably calling colleagues, associations they know, hey, have you bought these things before? Who's the best? Who's the worst? And then 17% of the buying journey is with you, the supplier. How with 17% of the time are you going to get them to rethink everything? So again, what's your online presence? Getting them to them early. I just find a lot of technical people have a tendency to wait much later in the buying cycle to try to get the customer to change their thought process. For those of you that have service contracts, one key component I see is service level agreements in them, penalty clauses. What I'm going to talk about is something from a book called Vested Sourcing, based on a Nobel Economics Prize winner. The professor is American, Kate Fidusek at the University of Tennessee. And she said, what you need to do, buyers, is think how a seller acts. I spend 20%, 15% of my time at procurement conferences. This is one of the messages I try to get across. So for those of you that are selling services, hopefully you can take this and not affront your customers, but challenge them a little bit. So let's say the customer says, I want 95% response rate. I want 95% of part A's to be available. I want, I want the machine to be available 95% of the time, just as an example. And what her research finds, that makes a lot of sense, that number actually becomes the ceiling, the highest they will get. If you're the service provider delivering the services to that customer, and you're delivering below that target level, you will do the calculation. What's the penalty versus what's my cost to get there? Now, if you're delivering at target at 95%, go to your boss and say, I want to spend $10,000 doing this, whatever that is, for the customer because it'll help them get to 96 or 97. Why would you spend $10,000 of your company's money with no return? So the stick doesn't work. The penalty actually becomes the cap of what they will get. The reward strategy says they'll do it both ways. Todd, if you don't deliver at 95%, here's the penalty. If you exceed it, I'm willing to reward you X, Y, and Z. Best practices by far is, say, rewarding your suppliers, making whatever those numbers are better. If you reward them with part of the benefit, it's amazing, because where am I going to be willing to invest? Okay, if I spend $10,000 there doing an extra service for this customer or this newer service, but it generates $100,000 of benefit for them, and they're willing to pay me a quarter of that, well, I'll do this. In the other example, I won't. Also, now you're moving the value earlier in the buying cycle. If I sign a 5-year or 10-year contract with the supplier, every year that I exceed that by 1 or 2% is cumulative over the life of it. Where the one on the left, you're just going to get that cap every time. So summarizing kind of the procurement stuff, I won't read all of it. You'll get the slides. Probably one of my favorites is Manufacturing Alliance, which is a big global but North American industrial association. Big capital equipment companies belong to it. And they did a survey before I did a Chief Procurement Officer Summit 2 years ago or 3 years ago. 2013. But they asked customers, do you have a structured methodology to measure and buy on value? So if you remember that 4-stage chart, do you measure energy? Do you measure downtime? Do you measure cost to repair? And ones that had a structured methodology to do that were 35% more profitable than companies that didn't. That did it in the back of a napkin or changed it every time they bought something. So, the discussion here is to help your customers say, yeah, focusing on lowest price that meets the minimum criteria is not the way the value is going to be derived. Now, a few quick things on pricing, just because I see a lot of service companies and product companies doing things that actually unintentionally drive the wrong behavior. This research, there's some professors I do some work with. One's Marco Bertini, he's at a school called ACCENTURE'S, and Oded Konisberg from London Business School. But It's behavioral science. So this is consumer pricing psychology. And how is this applicable to business? But when you really start thinking, we do things that sometimes hurt our customers. So the first one is called the JAM study. And the question is it better to give your customers more choice or less? I'm a Canadian, but I live in America, and this idea of mass customization, give the customer every choice they want. Actually, you find out that too much choice causes indecision, becomes risk averse, and people actually behave the way you don't expect them to. I'm not going to go through it all, but people are drawn to choices. They love choices. They're drawn to them, but they won't make a buying decision because there's a chance, buyer's remorse, they'll buy the wrong one. They will revert to the status quo. If you're the incumbent supplier, maybe you want them to do that. But if you're not, give options, but give a few. I think, in this case, the people that bought something was much higher, 33%, versus a much smaller number, but they reduced the options. So some offers I've seen from technical companies, their service offering is 12 different variations of the same service. People can't think that wide. Then they start unbundling it right away. What's the difference between A and C? What's the price difference? So therefore, you're charging me this for, give choice, but don't give too much choice. Again, in my experience, that was kind of the opposite of what I saw a lot of companies do. Compromise effect. And a lot of product companies, and I hear in the service world also, are doing something that's kind of counterintuitive. If you're given two choices, bottles of wine or steaks or computer monitors, whatever it is, because you're comparing it to the next best alternative, the one beside it, you go, that's more expensive. What you'll find is more people will revert to the lower price one. It's good enough. It meets my minimum requirement. So what I find companies doing, people don't want the expensive one, Todd. They want the cheap one. Let's make an even cheaper one, whatever, $5 bottle of wine, whatever it is. We'll make an even cheaper one, then we'll get even more business. All you do is drive your average sale price down. What consumer research shows, and this has all been vetted in business research also, I have a bunch of business slides, but we don't have the time now, is anchor one much higher. People might not buy the $50 one, but the $30 one becomes a good deal. So if I was building my service offering, I would have 3 options, and I would have a gold, platinum, whatever. So instead of, real quickly, the normal one is 95% response rate within 1 week, whatever, it includes this, but parts are at cost, plus 10, and customer pays for travel. The platinum one might be, no, it's all included in the price. You just charge a real big number. Well, I don't need that. That's ridiculous. Fine. The $30 one becomes a good deal. So sometimes the $50 one's designed that nobody buys it, which causes your finance people to get confused. No one would buy that. It's not rational. No, but my $30 one looks better now. Similar but different, the decoy effect. Again, you're given 2 choices, and assume the $3 to $7 on a linear scale, size versus price. You will probably start to justify. Are you hungry? Do you have a family? Whatever it is. In this case, the middle one is designed that nobody will buy it. So the opposite, the last one, the high-priced one was designed not to be there, and the middle one was the one they wanted to buy. Here, nobody buys the medium popcorn. But if it's $6.50 for that, 50 cents more, I get that. That's got to be better. I get a bunch of statistics how people move when these different options are given. 3 seems to be the best choice, not 2. I go 4 or 5, but don't go 10 or 20 options. Good, we're getting to some final thoughts. Best practices in pricing. Service as a subscription. Software as a subscription. Service as a subscription. Maybe you could say instead of doing the summer, fall, winter, whatever it is, service, and they're each $10,000 for the option, whatever that works out to. Instead of $40,000 a year, you're going to charge them $3,300 a month. If people like that because it doesn't spike the budgets as much, and you might have it done where they pay January, February, you do the service in March. You might actually get paid before you delivered. But again, people have different budget authorities, and they find that might be much easier. And then you get the product as a service, which is where you're selling the product and you're getting paid on the outcome. If you remember the slide with the panels and the renewable energy, we're seeing more of this. Don't buy the product, buy the output of the product and pay me. That means the product and the service are together. Bundling. What can you bundle and what can you unbundle from an offering? Sometimes stripping away, this is what the airlines do. Maybe you include installation with your machine and training and setup, whatever that is, etc. Maybe there's an option where you just start stripping everything away. I mean, customers that aren't willing to pay you for your value, they need to, well, I want that, and I want that also. Okay, fine. There's a lower price version, so think of the airlines, but you're going to pay to check your bag, you're going to pay to call me, you're going to pay. Maybe it's designed so people don't buy it, that they buy the original version. We talked about the outcome aspect. Price discriminate, and maybe your companies are better than companies that I've seen in the past, but are we punishing companies that behave wrong? The person that's always got an emergency, everything's last minute, etc. I mean, maybe you reward companies that you give me a forward order for a longer period of time, you let me schedule the service within the month so I can tie it in when I'm doing somebody else in the area. Maybe you reward people for the right behavior. You see this a lot in the consumer mentality. Go to a hotel, if you don't want your room cleaned every day, here's a $5 credit. So the reward mentality versus the punishment mentality. And again, what drives your business, you would have to know. But if you want a discount, it might make you a lot more profitable at the same time. Value-added services versus the free throw-ins. And for those of you that come from a product company that sells capital equipment, real quickly, and I'm finishing an article on this, but the best way I found to do this was my own experience at a company. We took every one of our services and we drew them on a XY matrix, the least complex and easiest to deliver in the lower left, going to the highest complexity, highest value, highest work to deliver. And what you found is that the service people wanted everything to be charged for, and the product people wanted everything to be given away for free. But once you looked at it on an XY axis like this, you kind of all agreed, hey, the bottom third is kind of just table stakes to be in the game, answering the phone, shipping a catalog, these types of things. But the top third, designing your whole new building for whatever it is, that's charged for. Then you can argue over the middle third. But when we tried to do it originally where everyone was arguing what's included, what's not included, it was very binary. So I found that to be a really simple but easier way to do it. And the last point here, I mean, don't say training should be free. Okay, a 1 hour training when a salesperson drops by at a big customer and does a lunch event and says, here's best practices or something. Okay, fine. All of our competitors do that. Mine's better than theirs. Okay, fine. That's one training. A 3-day training that's accredited where you fly in an expert and do this, maybe that's not. So don't get caught up on all training should be free or all training should be charged. You can have two variations of everything. The different levels of service, moving up the value scale to the predictive services. This is from my procurement person, and hopefully people on the phone, but I found this in different industries, they would not put price increases through. So you would sign a service contract or software, whatever it is, for 5 years. No price increase, and then 5 years into it, you go in for whatever, a 10% price increase. And then you say, well, that's only 2% a year for 5 years. His point was, you have no idea how I think or I get measured. Every year, we know costs are going to go up, inflation, whatever it is. Let's just say it's 3%. If your price increase goes through below that number, I might send you a letter just because I like sending letters to scare you. But in general, it's not worth my time or effort. 2% versus 0, that's a small number. It's below 3%. I'll focus on the people that are 10 or 20%. If you wait to the 5-year contract and come in, it's 0 to 10. Oh my goodness, that's a big increase. Maybe it's time for me to look around. Maybe you've incentivized me that there's somebody else out there. Small price increases annually, they actually prefer than one big one at the end of every contract. Align your sales and pricing model to how your customers make money, I guess is one of my takeaways there. And selling services, make your services visible. One big capital equipment company did a lot of the predictive analytic type stuff, the Internet of Things. They did all the service when their customer wasn't there, when it was down for Christmas holidays, nights, weekends. And then when tough times came, the customer said, I never see these people. We have no problems. The machines run fine. Well, of course they run fine because the maintenance has been done, and they did it at the most opportune time to help you keep production up. So this company started just to leave little notes. Here's the service I did. Here's what we think the value was it. And the corporate account person every quarter went in and went through everything. If they don't see you and hear you, when renewal time comes, there's a good chance you might get cut. Having your service people to be able to quote on site, real time. One professor I know very well, we were just talking, he said, some of the studies is 50, 60, 70% of people have a higher closing rate when they're able to quote and buy on site. I had somebody come look at my furnace. He said, do you want me to check the air conditioner while you're here? Hey, I'll do it for $50 because there's no travel time. Sure, why not? If the company would have called me a week later, we saw that you had an air conditioner. Would you like us? It wouldn't have been interesting. It would have cost more because they'd have to send the person back. So having your service people be able to give quotes real time is a big differentiator. Constantly measure your value. I mean, again, that's what the whole webinar is about. Talked about work on your internal stuff. The sales force. One of my best experiences is selling services is different than selling product. And don't get me wrong, every product person should be driven to sell service, but they need to have that expert available to come in, to pull off the bench when they need. And I also found that having service people from the industry you're calling on. In my old company, we had some people that were industry specialists. You could walk into a paper mill, and the customer would look at this person like he's God. He's like, wow, this guy knows everything. He's been here. He knows the language. Again, the generic company PowerPoint presentation doesn't resonate. Industry-specific examples do. What's it worth doing it? I mean, the biggest takeaway from Value Merchants, this is Jim Anderson's work. Closing rates increase, but my favorite one is point one. Companies that take a value strategy, quantifying it, selling it, differentiating based on it, are 24% more profitable than the industry average that they're in, and 36% more profitable than the people that take the volume approach, load the factory, utilization of our service people. I know those are important, but all the research shows, companies that take this value approach are more profitable. Companies that buy this way are 35% more profitable. Companies that sell this way are 36% more profitable. It's not a zero-sum game. You increase your closing rate, reduce your discounting, and the sales cycle speeds up. Okay, you'll see a bunch of this. And I think last slide around here, maybe there's one more. Over the years, I had a great opportunity to learn from a lot of academic people. I mean, Kellogg's on marketing of value and measuring it. You saw Jim Anderson's book. Pricing for Value, London Business School. IMD's a school in Switzerland, executive strategy. There's a gentleman at Assad, professor named Wolfgang Ulaga. His whole career has been based on service strategy. So, I mean, a lot of work's been around how, companies that sell this way and buy this way make more money. These procurement associations have actually had me come in. NIGP is government procurement. PASIA was Asia. I'm in Brazil. They're saying, we want to buy value. How do we do it? Because every supplier comes in and uses the words, but we don't know which ones to believe, which ones not to, how to contract. These governments have actually changed the rules. Again, I don't have time to go through it all, but if you're saying, hey, my customers can't buy this way, they can. There's a bunch of rules by every government. I have to know which country you're in to give the exact references. They want to buy value. We just got to be able to demonstrate it. And then again, some consultants, they're saying it's time to buy measured value. So with that, my job is to help companies do this, become more profitable, whether that's as a consultant or if you're looking for a full-time value expert, let me know. LinkedIn, I do post something once in a while that I hope is some value. And my website there, you'll see some videos on it, me talking at conferences, and a bunch of white papers. So Nick, back to you. Sorry, I probably left you short of time.
No worries, Todd. So we are running a bit short on time. So if it's okay, if we want to stick around for a couple extra minutes, Todd, we might be able to get to one or two questions. We do have a couple minutes. First, I want to just share a quick message about Leverage Point. We do offer a software solution that helps companies create, capture, and communicate value, as Todd said. Companies that use Leverage Point to convey this in an interactive sales context have found that they have 5 to 15% higher close rates and 5 to 25% higher prices when using Leverage Point value propositions. So in the survey, there's going to be an option where you can select to sign up for a demo, or feel free to check out any of the content on our site. So when we get into the Q&A, we'll just go for 2 questions. Is that okay, Todd?
Yeah, for sure.
So how about we start with this one? What are the system and process requirements for an organization beginning outcome or performance-based contracts?
I think you need to be able to define what your value is, because you have to know what you're going to measure for the customer. So, what do we do for our customers? How would we measure that? Again, not to be a plug, but here's our tool, Leverage Point, here's our tool. Also to say, these are the numbers we want to use in the tool. So when you go to a customer, you say, we think, in the food industry in America, energy is this or downtime's this. So have kind of a appendix of numbers Customers are much better saying, we don't like that number, let's change it. But don't go to them and say, you need to give us numbers on these 100 things. They won't give it to you. So how will you measure that value? The supplier, the people on the phone, what numbers will you use in it? Mr. Customer, what happens if we don't hit it? What happens if we do hit it? Do we get price increases if we exceed it? Do we get more share if we exceed it? If we don't, what's the penalty clause? How do we make sure that we're getting access to the opportunities? Every quarter we meet, we enumerate the 5 opportunities for improvements. Again, depends on the type of company you're with. And then what's the sign-off process with the customer to acknowledge they've received that projected or actual value? One company told their internal people, if you sign any value statements that they delivered value, we'll just take it out of your budget. Well, of course, the maintenance person doesn't want that to happen. So making sure that there's none of these unintended consequences. And then saying, okay, over the 3-year agreement, I think the ones that I've been involved with, we've gotten down to 4 pages, all with the lawyers signing off. But again, it's an intent, a strategy, and following those KPIs of what is value, how do we measure, what numbers are we going to use for it, what happens when we exceed it or don't hit it.
Great, thank you. And we'll do one more. Let's go with this one. How do you get organizations comfortable with outcome-based contracts if they are subject to risk of performance by buyers?
Yeah, I mean, funny enough, buyers are very risk averse. That's why they'll revert to lower price because they believe there's less risk there. I think what's interesting is the least amount of risk is performance based. So if you're buying a lower priced whatever you're buying, product or service, you're hoping that works. And they've all had situations where that one didn't work. So if you say, look, we're going to align our business to how you get paid, there's no risk. You're getting an output. You're not buying number of hours, number of services, and hoping you're going to get value. You're going to get the actual output you want. The machines last longer, the average temperature is less wherever it is, the energy consumption is less, whatever that is. So you're actually reducing their risk. Also, I would say, again, I tried to cover some of the statistics. It's now best practice. Governments are sending out mandates saying we've got to buy best value. So it's not as risky. And finally, I think there's this mindset that it has to go to, a traditional approach, buy my product or service, to 100% performance-based. I've had more successful agreements by doing a collar. We agree that we're going to create so much value. If not, here's the penalty. Okay, you got some skin in the game. I've got some skin in the game. That's good. Because I sure as heck don't want to be open-ended. I mean, the supplier doesn't want to take all the risk, and they get payment maybe, and the buyer doesn't want to end up paying 10 times more than he had to because you hit all the performance contracts. So a collar around that value is the best way, I think, to explain it.
All right, great. Well, thanks to everyone who stuck around for this session, and thank you to Todd for a great session. Before you go, a reminder to everyone to pre-register for next month's webinar during the exit survey. We will be joined by Tim Smith, and he'll be talking about ways to use customer value and voice a customer to set price and how to leverage that in other markets. We're really excited about this one. So that's it from us today. Thank you all for taking the time to join us, and a special thank you again to Todd for his insights. From all of us here at Leverage Point, have a wonderful rest of your week. Take care.